It started with a calendar ping. Not the usual 9-drawer or 9:30 that at least pretended to be professional decorum. No, this one was for 9:13 a.m. The invite subject line, organizational streamlining touchpoint, sent at 11:52 p.m. the night before. I stared at it for a long time, blinking against the pale blue of the Outlook interface like maybe the font would shift, reveal a typo, a clue. But the time stayed the same. The title stayed the same. And deep in my stomach, something tightened. No agenda, no attendees listed, but I didn't need a map to know where this was going. When I walked into conference room 3B, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Fresh carpet glue, maybe a hint of lemon cleaner, and underneath it something synthetic like fear that had been Febrezed. The blinds were half drawn, filtering the cloudy Seattle morning into stripes across the table. Maren Kloss, my manager of 4 years, sat rigid on the left. She was wearing that high-collar navy blouse she only pulled out when pretending she had control. Her eyes didn't lift when I entered. No hello. Just a tap of her pen on a closed notebook. Sitting beside her was Dax Lovell from HR, perpetually tan in a way no one in our office ever managed without filters. His smile was already loaded like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "Everin," he said, gesturing to the chair already pulled out for me. "Thanks for making time." I didn't answer. I sat. "We'll be brief." Dax began folding his hands like he was about to deliver a eulogy. "As part of our organizational optimization, your role has been deemed redundant under the new structure." Redundant. I waited for Maren to speak, to shift, to glance up. Nothing. Her fingers curled around the pen like it might save her from sinking. "This decision isn't performance-based," Dax added quickly. "It's strictly strategic realignment. You'll find the details of your separation package in this envelope." He slid it across the table, crisp and cream-colored. My name typed in block font. I didn't touch it. Maren finally moved, pushing back her chair. "Dax will walk you out," she said, then exited without another word. And just like that, after 12 years, my last official act was being escorted down a hallway lined with posters I had helped design. The walls were still warm from the spotlight of quarterly wins, the ones I'd carried quietly on my back. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just sat. The cardboard box sat on the floor like a tombstone, my nameplate a chipped mug from the 2014 launch, the photo of Mom and me at Pike Place, and the little glass terrarium that HR told me technically belonged to the company. I took it anyway. Let them invoice me for the dirt. I hadn't texted my sister. I didn't want to explain it out loud yet. Somehow saying it would make it too real, like pulling the emergency brake on a moving train and watching the cars pile up. The envelope rested on my lap. Dax's parting gift. Inside 2 weeks' severance, Cobra details I already knew I wouldn't afford, and a brief line under a bolded header, "Per standard policy. This concludes your compensation package." No signature from Maren, no note, just ink and insult. I placed it beside me on the floor. Then I stood. One by one, I pulled out the drawers of my desk. Old team photos, lanyards from leadership summits, printouts of onboarding guides I rewrote when no one else bothered, a stack of thank you cards, some signed, most not. My hands moved without thinking, feeding each paper to the shredder. The hum was mechanical and precise, like slicing through a memory. Performance reviews, gone. Budget decks, gone. My copy of the diversity initiative I rewrote after Dax misspelled inclusion, gone. I reached for a frame on the back corner of the shelf, Employee of the Year 2016. My name engraved just slightly off-center. Behind it, something shifted. A leather folder tucked flat and long forgotten. I slid it out, surprised by its weight. My handwriting scrawled across a post-it on the front original offer, 2011. I sat back down, opened the flap. The paper inside had yellowed at the edges. The ink faded but legible. Base salary, benefits, stock options I barely remembered, vague legal jargon I had skimmed at the time. I flipped through the pages with detached curiosity, almost ready to toss it aside until one paragraph caught my eye. Clause 14b. Tucked into the second-to-last page, wedged between mandatory arbitration and the non-compete clause I'd once joked about with an intern. All unvested shares shall vest immediately upon termination by the company, not for cause. I blinked, read it again. My heart didn't race, not yet. It just slowed like it was making room for something heavier. I skimmed back up the page, confirming the document. Header, the date, the signature. It was my offer letter dated February 8th, 2011. My initials still inked in blue at the bottom. They had let me go, not for cause. Dax said it himself, with the same smirk he probably wore when he told interns we're like family. I remembered the day I signed it. The recruiter's voice over speakerphone, lighthearted and vague. There's an equity pool standard vesting over 4 years. Don't worry, the lawyers put that part in. I didn't ask more. I was too busy feeling like I'd finally escaped the chaos of my last startup, where benefits meant unlimited liquasse. Over the years, the company shifted its culture, and I shifted with it. New roles, new mergers, performance bonuses that arrived late or never. But the equity grants, they kept slipping those in. Quiet refreshers and quarterly update emails. Nothing flashy, just numbers and bullet points. I archived them without thinking. But this clause, this language, was clear. I got up, crossed the room, and retrieved the envelope from the floor, ripped it open again. There it was: salary, health insurance, continuation, career, transition, coaching. Not one word about stock options. Not one acknowledgement of the unvested grants I still technically held. I returned to my desk and opened my email, searching my inbox for equity refresh. There they were. March 2022. November 2023. Over 8,000 shares unvested. Until now. I sat perfectly still for a long time. My jaw ached from clenching. Then slowly I pulled my laptop closer and opened a blank document. At the top I typed, "What I deserve." And then beneath it, Clause 14b. I didn't sleep that night. I toggled between industry forums, Reddit threads, archived equity grant emails, and legal blogs with fonts too small and advice too vague. Most of it was noise. But around 2:30 a.m., under a comment titled, "Don't sign anything before you read everything," I found a username that popped up repeatedly, Halden Law. Someone wrote, "Brenda Halden is the kind of lawyer who reads faster than you, panic and cuts cleaner than your company's PR team." I clicked the link. Her website was a single scrolling page, no stock photos, no motivational quotes, just a bio. A list of successful arbitration cases, and one sentence at the bottom: "I don't do friendly settlements. I do closure that makes executives flinch." I filled out the form. She called me back 4 hours later. No assistant, no scheduler, just Brenda herself. Her voice slightly raspy, like she'd already won 2 arguments that morning. Her office was in the basement of a secondhand bookstore across from an old fire station. No signage, just a red door and the smell of burnt espresso. I liked it immediately. She sat behind a chipped desk, no monitor, just piles of annotated paperwork and a legal pad already waiting for my story. I handed her my original offer letter. She read silently, flipped to the final pages, and stopped. Her brow arched. They didn't reference this clause at all, not even a word. Her lips curved slowly, wickedly. "Well, she said they're about to regret thinking you wouldn't read." I exhaled tension, leaving me like air from a slow puncture. She slid the letter aside and pulled a clean sheet of paper in front of her. "This isn't just leverage," she said, tapping her pen. "It's breach of contract wrapped in negligence and served with a side of bad faith, which means—" She looked up, eyes sharp. "We don't ask for severance. We go for the shares." Brenda wrote like a scalpel. No threats, no fluff, just language that pressed where it hurt. Her opening paragraph cited the original employment agreement, the equity clause, and the termination context. Then came the phrase she said was designed to make in-house counsel shift in their chair. We trust this is a simple oversight and you will act accordingly. She included the clause in full highlighted in yellow with a footnote referencing 2 California cases where similar omissions resulted in arbitration losses for the employer. She didn't demand, she didn't beg. She just made it clear we were paying attention. And that was apparently the scariest thing you could do to a corporate legal team. I reread the draft 12 times, once for tone, twice for commas, then 10 more just to remind myself it was real, that the words were for me, that someone had taken my quiet, filed-away clause and made it ring like a warning bell. Brenda barely looked up. "Want me to hit send now?" "Not yet," I said. I needed the weekend. I needed to feel something other than adrenaline. She nodded, tapping her pen. "We'll time it for 9:01 a.m. Monday. First thing they see, last thing they expect." That night, I went home and opened a new spreadsheet labeled Unvested Holdings. I started entering numbers from the grant emails I'd found. Then I cross-referenced our last internal share valuation, which hadn't yet updated post-merger. Roughly $212,000 in equity. That was the low estimate. I stared at the number. Not because it was huge, but because it had been mine all along, silently accumulating, invisibly forgotten, until they made the mistake of thinking I'd leave without reading. Monday morning came like a storm held behind glass. At 8:57, I texted Brenda, ready. She replied with a single check mark. At 9:01 a.m. on the dot, the letter was released into their inboxes. No exclamation points, no warning, just a quiet digital tap on the door. And then we waited. At 9:43 a.m., I refreshed my inbox. Nothing. At 9:56, I checked my phone settings to confirm push notifications were still on. They were. At 10:02, signal pinged. Romy Hest, former comms lead. One of the few who'd sent me a real goodbye message when I was walked out. No one's talking, but legal's in a tailspin. Something in your letter triggered a compliance flag. My fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't reply right away. I didn't want to ask for more than she was willing to whisper. Instead, I stood and paced, back and forth across the apartment. I opened my stock grant tracker, recounted, refreshed the market data, rechecked the clause in the contract just to confirm I hadn't hallucinated it. The same words stared back. Vest immediately upon termination, not for cause. My stomach didn't flip. It pressed inward tight and quiet. I wasn't afraid they had fired me. That part was done. What I felt now was something older, more brittle. A lifetime of being overlooked, fighting to believe I wasn't imagining the power I suddenly held. At 10:18, Brenda texted, "They're already printing it out and underlining it in red. You are no longer invisible." I stared at the message for a full minute, then set the phone down and sat. Not on the couch, on the floor. I needed grounding. I needed gravity. They had read it, which meant they knew. Which meant someone in that building, someone who hadn't thought about me since the minute I cleared my desk, was now reading my name and scrambling. I didn't feel joy, not yet. What I felt was the silence before a decision, the hush before a hammer lands. And then, at 10:37, my phone buzzed again, this time from someone I hadn't heard from since the day I was fired, Maren Kloss, my former manager, my ex-advocate. Subject line clarification. Meeting request, equity matter. The invite called it a clarification meeting, like this was all just a little misunderstanding, a spilled coffee, not a severed contract. It came from a legal assistant I'd never heard of. Still, the location was familiar, conference room 3B, the same room where they'd walked me out. This time, I didn't walk in alone. Brenda arrived 10 minutes early, blazer-sharp expression, unreadable. I followed her lead, letting her silence carry more threat than a monologue ever could. Inside the room, Maren tight-lipped and overly moisturized, Dax trying not to fidget. A man in a pale blue suit with too perfect posture introduced himself as Jorian Marr Corporate Counsel. and at the head of the table, pretending this wasn't personal, sat Clint Evers, the CEO. He looked exactly like his press photos, tan, taut, and vaguely bored. No one shook hands. Brenda opened her binder. "You asked for clarification. Jorian spoke first. We'd like to offer Ms. Thorne a one-time settlement to resolve the equity discrepancy. Full payout adjusted valuation as of last quarter." He slid a folder toward me. Brenda didn't touch it. Neither did I. I glanced at the top sheet. The number wasn't small, but it wasn't serious either, roughly 30% of what my full shares were worth. And the condition Brenda asked, though we both knew, mutual NDA, standard language. I closed the folder without a word. Marin shifted in her seat. Dax studied the wall like he wished it would open. Clint leaned forward, hands clasped. "This is a fair offer, Averin. No need to escalate. We respect your time here." I met his eyes. "You respected it so much you never mentioned what you owed me." He opened his mouth but said nothing. Brenda smiled without humor. "We'll respond with our position tomorrow, in writing." We stood. No one stopped us. Walking out of that room, I didn't feel like I'd reclaimed anything yet, but I wasn't the one playing defense anymore. The next morning, Brenda called at 7:12. Her voice was crisp. "We're sending the ultimatum today." The reply was sent at exactly 9:00 a.m. Brenda's timing was intentional. Not 8:59, not 9:01. She wanted it to be the first thing they saw, stamped with certainty. The letter was concise. No new threats. Just a clear final fork in the road. Option 1, immediate full vesting payout based on current market value. No NDA, no conditions. Clean transfer by end of business today. Option 2, Ms. Thorne retains all vested shares, activates her shareholder rights files for equity audit, and pursues legal action to review suppression patterns post-merger. She'd included timestamps, valuation estimates, references to SEC language, and one quote from a 2019 case where another company tried to bury equity clauses. They lost badly. I didn't breathe much that morning. I didn't need to. Brenda did all the talking. By noon, we were called back to the boardroom. Same players. The atmosphere had changed. Greg from HR was now at the table instead of avoiding eye contact. He looked like someone had vacuumed the air out of his lungs. Jorian had a legal pad with underlines so thick the ink bled through. Marin looked like she hadn't slept. Clint opened. "We've reviewed your letter." Brenda didn't nod. She waited. Clint glanced at Greg, who visibly swallowed. "We'd like to resolve this quickly without unnecessary exposure or escalation." Brenda folded her hands. "Then you'll accept option 1A pause." Jorian shifted in his seat. "We'd like to propose a hybrid. Modified valuation, 6-month NDA, and non-disparagement." "No," I said before Brenda could speak. My voice was quiet but level. "You had your offer. This isn't a discussion." Clint leaned back, jaw set. "You're not leaving room to negotiate." Brenda tilted her head. She wasn't invited to negotiate her severance. Remember silence. Heavy. Real. Clint finally nodded to Jorian. "Draft the transfer." We stood. No congratulations. No closure. Back in the elevator, Brenda smiled at me for the first time. Now she said we see if they follow through before the clock runs out. It came in at 8:41 p.m. An email from someone new in legal, probably too junior to know better than to send it themselves. The subject line read simply, "Resolution document, equity transfer terms." Brenda opened it before I could. 7 figures, full vesting, immediate transfer, no NDA. Then at the bottom, a final paragraph in carefully vague legalese. They called it a non-aggression understanding. Brenda laughed once short sharp, then hit delete before I finished reading it. "I'm not letting them dress a gag order in polite shoes," she said. She redlined the page, removed every condition, and sent it back. Her email had no greeting, just a header that said, "Revised terms. Nothing further will be accepted." They signed. It was over. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there while Brenda forwarded the wire confirmation. The PDF opened slowly like it knew the moment mattered. The amount was clean. No rounding, no games. Every share accounted for. Every grant honored. The numbers glowed in my inbox like a slow sunrise. Then I opened my banking app, and there it was. The balance shifted. No pop-up, no sound. Just a new line in a plain font that now held more truth than anything Marin or Dax ever said to my face. My body didn't react the way I thought it would. No euphoria, no flood of victory, just steadiness. My breathing even. My hands still. I thought maybe I'd feel lighter, but what I felt instead was grounded, anchored, like the version of me that had been erased was finally stepping back into place pixel by pixel. Brenda messaged one last time that night, spend it wisely, or just let it sit there and make them nervous. I closed my laptop and looked around my apartment. Nothing had changed. Not visibly, but something inside me had. Not because of the money, but because of what it proved. And in that stillness, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I gave myself 72 hours to sit with the silence. No spreadsheets, no emails, no inbox refreshes, just walks with my headphones and slow meals, and the kind of sleep that doesn't come from exhaustion, but release. On the fourth morning, I opened a new tab and donated $20,000 to a nonprofit in Oakland that runs workshops on contract literacy for women in tech. I didn't include a note. They'd know what to do with it. Then I wired another chunk to a developer I found through a privacy advocacy group. The goal was simple: build an anonymous internal forum, encrypted invite-only for employees still trapped under NDA. No names, no titles. Just truth passed quietly between the people who'd lived it. I didn't want a feature article. I didn't write a viral Medium post. I didn't even update my LinkedIn. I didn't need to. Let them wonder. Let the silence echo differently now. People kept asking if I felt vindicated. That wasn't the word. What I felt was clarified. Like someone had finally wiped the fog off the mirror and shown me the outline of my own spine. They had counted on my silence. They had built their convenience on it. They forgot I was the kind of person who reads to the end. The money sits in a separate account now. I watch the number rise and fall with the market, a quiet signal that I'm still here, still watching. I haven't touched it, not really. Not because I'm afraid to spend it, but because it's not the prize. It's the proof. Some nights I still open the PDF with the clause 14b. I don't need to, but I do. Just to see it. Just to remember how close they came to making me forget myself. And when I close it, I say it under my breath every time like a mantra, like armor. They erased me. So I wrote myself back in with equity.